I truly believe that you need to have lived experience to become the full package. You can grow without having to move forward. I think it is a misconception that you can't be empathetic in leadership.
And what do you mean by that when you say more growth?
I don't think I would have got there if I hadn't have spent the time to understand who I am, which sounds really self-centered, but it hopefully helps and impacts others today. I see this a lot when I talk to my team and they're kind of going, yeah, but I've been doing this role for a long time and, I want what's next.
Welcome back to another special episode of the Growth Distillery, where we are meeting with some of the brightest minds across advertising and marketing to talk about our unfiltered selves. I have the pleasure of being joined by Sian Whitnall. Sian is the co-chief executive over at OMD Australia. You've held a raft of senior executive roles across almost every aspect of agency value creation, which is really interesting. Sian has been the interactive chair at the MFA. You were Campaign Asia's 40 under 40 in 2022.
Made me feel so youthful.
You were one of BNT's Women in Technology in 2021, but you also have a huge presence across a breadth of formal and informal mentor programs. So firstly, I don't know where you find the time, but thank you so much for joining us. I'm delighted to be able to talk.
Thanks for
having me. The show and tell that I just explained was what we call the A side. What I would love to know, and I'd love for you to talk to us about, is what's the B side story to Sian?
A B-side story. It would be hilarious if you were asking my husband this, because he has a very different perception.
We've got him waiting outside. We'll bring him in.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I can tell you his synopsis. It would be Lovable Hurricane. That's
Okay.
what he calls me. But I am a very proud Welsh woman. We
Yes.
spoke about that earlier. Sian is in Barn, not
Yes, it's not Sian.
Look, proud Welsh. And the reason I say that is because I had an interesting upbringing because my father is from like a army background.
Okay.
So, and with that, he then moved into multiple leadership roles that took him all over the world. So I say that because we have a really tight family unit, which stems from my upbringing in the valleys. And that kind of creation of that really tight unit then meant we were kind of able to be picked up and moved around the world. And you're kind of okay with that, right? And
Home was where the family was.
100%.
Yeah.
So relationships run super deep. But then I started out in media. I don't even remember when, but it was actually through a contact my mum had, which was great. And her first thing was like, oh, I know this guy, he can get you an internship, because I left uni, didn't know what the hell I was doing, didn't know what media was. And I rocked up and they offered me an internship. It was like, you could go into TV, print or digital. And I was like, oh, digital, let's have a little crack at that. That sounds interesting. And I ended up doing marketing for sex toys for the first 18 months, which is really fun.
High growth sector, I presume.
Yeah, we talked. It was a very, very interesting model of CPDs. I'll leave you to figure out what the Ds was.
Yeah.
But the cost pers were hilarious. But yeah, so I kind of stumbled into kind of digital media and marketing. And I'd probably say I had a career of two halves.
Okay.
So the first one, and talks to my personality, very ambitious and competitive, and again, just kind of deeply passionate. So I found digital interesting. So I really got stuck in. But then it was the first half was almost growth at all costs. So, and the all costs, and I didn't realize it was a cost at the time. So it would be like looking at the next title I could chase. So if you look at my kind of career progression, it was pretty linear, pretty fast. I was like one of the annoying young tweens that was like suddenly a director, and I was 24, 25. It was really, really young. And actually I'd say that was a bit of a downfall, because there was so much inexperience, so much experience I didn't have. And then the other kind of part of my career was really when I moved to Australia. So what was it, 12 years or so ago? I think, I can't do my maths today. It's kind of one where you'll see, if you looked at my LinkedIn, which is probably very beige, is that you kind of stay in the same role for a long period of time. But I probably had more growth in that time period than than I had when I was perceptually growing really fast.
And what do you mean by that when you say more growth?
So my role before the role I'm currently in now, I was in for 5 years. And I'd probably say that if you were to look on paper, you have one title, right? Chief Digital Officer, that was it. Lovely. And you're probably going, and I see this a lot when I talk to my team, and they're kind of going, yeah, but I've been doing this role for a long time and, I want what's next. And I'm like, what's next? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I would probably say that in that 5 years, I could have probably written you a different job description for the same title because it was evolving and I was being able to lean into what was really interesting me and then almost organically grow a role that really felt like I was filling up my cup, growing and also building the skill sets you kind of needed for more growth. I also didn't know where growth was going to come. I didn't know what the next title was, so I kind of took that off. The reason I talk about it like that is because there was two things that kind of happened in that middle that caused that transition. Well, firstly, we had a bit of my daughter was born and it didn't go particularly well. Like we had some unplanned issues. And there was a long hangover then of would everything be okay? Yeah. So long story short, she's perfect. I think it was like 20 million to 1 odds that she's fine. But we didn't actually know whether she was going to be okay or not for 2 years.
Yeah, wow.
So I always talk about it as the toilet door moment. The toilet door being this door that we were on this hospital ward, hearing all this news and trying to figure out. I had just given birth as well. So very hormonal. I was lying on the floor of this toilet door, pretty much having a breakdown, going, I just don't know how to deal with this. And then it took a long time to know, obviously, what was going on. So then I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why did I feel that way? And it was because I was out of control. So I would say at that moment, I didn't really understand myself. So the first half of my career, I was acting on my behaviour. It's my basic instinct, which is
what you think people want to see from an executive,
which is ambition, growth, progression. Let's go, win, win, win. And I always remember someone saying, like, look, you're a bit like, well, it was in the UK, so you're a bit like Marmite. Like people either love you or hate you. So you'd probably say Vegemite now, right? Yeah. But and you don't have that much EQ in a room. And I'm like, that's all fair, but am I going to win? Am I going to get the next title? I don't really care.
Thanks, but
whatever. And then it all played out. And so the only thing that changed is obviously we were on the journey with my daughter, which, as I said, luckily for us, we got the amazing outcome after that couple of years. But it forced me to, like, you can't survive if you can't focus and deal with what was going on. So I had to go and I saw a trauma counsellor who was incredible, who then almost broke it down and tried for me to better understand my personality and what I need to survive and what I need to thrive. Control is my happy place. And I'd argue that if you're trying to be a good leader, you don't try and control everything. So that was probably going to hold me back at some point if I hadn't have addressed it. I would also say, like, she taught me, like, what are the things do I do in a stress state versus what do I do in a happy state versus what am I doing in an engaged state? And really kind of unpacking that not only helped me kind of support my daughter, but it also then made me better understand who I was becoming as a leader and how I want my career to play out. And it really forced me to stop and slow down and build in reflection and figure out that you can grow without having to move forward. And you can learn from every single moment and opportunity and every conversation. Like, I'll use today as a moment for reflection, understand, like, what should I be doing differently? How would I turn up differently? What did I get out of it? It's really good. But I think unless I had fundamentally understood how my base operates, I don't think I would have started to change. And arguably, I'd say I've had more growth since understanding that and unpacking that. And I've been able to achieve more, even on paper, which is not the goal, because really the goal now is just happiness and world peace.
That's the right objective.
Yeah, thank you. And like the happiness of my family and, building something for us to kind of enjoy together. Like, I don't think I would have got there if I hadn't have spent the time to understand who I am, which sounds really self-centered, but it hopefully helps and impacts others today.
There is so much there.
Oh, it's a lot, isn't it? Try being in my brain. It's really quite painful.
But it's amazing. There's so many things that I think are supremely insightful, growth without necessarily progress and seeing things for what they are. Well, firstly, I'm very grateful that your daughter's absolutely fine. She's very lucky to have such a mum.
It's definitely a partnership.
Yeah.
I am winning in the husband lottery.
Yeah. And look, control might be your happy place, but you can't control kids.
Yeah. So actually, I always say that the way that I was coping with things. So I guess going back to the kind of the upbringing where you're growing around and you have family as a unit, like the way that I was able to cope with that was by putting things in a mental box, putting it on a shelf, and then never dealing with it again, which is compartmentalization and actually not the healthiest strategy.
And it ends up biting you. It all comes back.
And you can't put kids in a box. It's illegal, but it's also not practical. It doesn't, you can't, and actually because of what happened, we had such a long period of time where we didn't know how it was going to play out. It's something that you can't get away from because you're thinking about it every waking moment.
Yeah, and I can imagine that and having had some lived experience that's adjacent to yours, and you and I spoke about this earlier, that broadsides, all of that ambition and all of that plan just goes out the window when this happens. And there's this, a silver lining, if there is such a thing, this profound moment of reflection and recalibration to sort of what matters most. And, you have to go inward to travel forward. If you were to to try to put a bit of structure around this, because there is just so much there. If you were to look at that transition from the first half to the second half and distill it down to a couple of things, 2-3 things that you jettisoned at that point in that transition, and maybe 2 or 3 things that you picked up that you've carried with you to where you are today, what might they be?
I think, the things that I've kind of left behind is, what does good growth look like?
Mm-hmm. And why that?
My previous perspective was growth was new title, new role, new job, new, upwards.
Yeah. The glitter.
Like, let's go at things hard. I also wanted to be the youngest account manager. I want to be the youngest, which is, and that wasn't going to help anyone, because I truly believe that you need to have lived experience to become the full package. And so there's the things that I left behind was the fact that, you should just be focusing on what's next. I think that's an unhealthy and a healthy mindset, because I think you overlook the opportunities that are in front of you if you do that. I think I also left behind the perspective that you can't be your true self as well. I think I kind of and I still do it now if I'm in a I think there is in everybody that the best thing about a person is what makes you you. And I think my win at all cost strategy was kind of coming at a detriment of me turning up and being a bit of my natural self, because actually you'd argue with the upbringing I had and the deep family roots, that's all about connection. That's all about building relationships and fostering relationships. And you'd argue that humanness is what you...
It was the counterpoint to what you were playing.
Yeah, I got feedback. Game. I was like, what was it? Emotional rock. And I'm like, that doesn't help. You can't, that doesn't help anyone. But I think then my mindset, and then moving forward, one of the things I take on and kind of live by is that everything's a learning moment, which sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's true, because nobody is a finished article. That is the mindset that you kind of have to, and it's not like I sit there and do a reflection diary every day, but I take little moments, and after anything, I'm always thinking about what could I have taken differently. Ask for feedback as well, ask a perspective. I think it's always really good to get. And then, I think if you had the mindset and that no one's a finished article, and also everyone's human, everyone has a story. And so when we did the marketing academy, and I was really lucky enough, I was actually lucky enough to do the marketing academy after I think it was, it was just after my second daughter was born. We were the quarantinis. We were the second year, kind of into COVID. And it was probably an awesome time for me to do that, because you kind of talk about taking off the mask and understanding that. And it's a really good journey, because I probably couldn't have talked about my emotions and my behaviours so succinctly, which I don't feel has been particularly succinct, as I could without doing that. But I think the understanding that everybody has their own story, everyone has their own kind of journey, and everyone has their own perception. And it's not your job to be able to unpack that. I mean, there's moments you would do as a friend and support someone, but I think understanding the cues and understanding the drive and the why and the, what is somebody else's motivation is a really interesting skill to have.
Yeah, what fills their cup.
Yeah.
You touch on two things I'd love to double click on, and I really love the turn of phrase, nobody's the finished article, right? The book is never finished. And you spoke to I think, two halves of that in my mind, the critical role of feedback and reflection. And then I think, ongoing learning and ongoing education, in many forms, from, formal intensive programs like TMA all the way through to, micro moments of learning. As someone that sits at the pointy end of an organization, how do you go about on the former, building that muscle? Because, taking feedback, particularly constructive feedback, is not something that comes naturally for a lot of us. And then how do you find the time for the other half?
Well, all it is just listening.
Okay.
Like
go a little bit deeper into that.
No, full stop.
Okay, we'll move on.
No, it's just listening. I think the really good example is, and I think maybe the more senior but you become in the organisation, you have the potential to become almost so removed from people's day to day. You can't. Not everyone in an organisation is having the same lived experience, irrespective of job title, or
it can be wildly different.
It can be more wildly different, right? And I think if the thing that you can lean into, and so I'm saying, like, no one's a finished article, because I think they have to lean into what they don't know. I would say the thing that I don't know at the moment is we are dealing with this incredible new generation of employees coming into organisations who have vastly different wants, needs, support systems than
drivers, motivators.
than I did when it was like 16 years ago I entered the industry, and in that 16 years that has changed, because you've been through a pandemic, on the cusp of a recession. You've got the like connected age, and the on-demand generation, and I think the worst thing you could do would be not to listen, and that is saying, and so it's listening and recognizing that it's the people around you, and listen to the feedback. And you can't please everyone. I'm not saying that, but if you're not listening and understanding,
that's first half, Sian. Not second.
You can't please everyone. Like you have to be building something that suits the majority.
Yeah.
And then you can support the kind of the minority, or the kind of the smaller groups within that. Like, but if you're not listening, you're not actually leading properly, because you've become blinkered in delivering a specific outcome, and you've kind of then shut off your own learning, because you're not willing to upskill yourself in understanding this. Might use my example of this kind of new generation entering the workforce. You're not helping anyone. And I think if I went in with a mindset that I'm the finished article, that would be the perspective, that I knew exactly what I was doing,
and that
how
you were
I
the
was
right
going to do
imprint.
it. And then how I was going to do it, and how the outcome. And that's effectively confirmation bias, because all you're looking for is the pat on the back to say that what you're doing and where you're heading is exactly where you need to be.
What do you think are some of the fallacies in leadership that we currently subscribe to? I think you've touched on a couple, I think, in terms of your reflections on, first half or first chapter of the career. But are there any other areas where we see executives filtering themselves that you just think does them a disservice rather than builds them up as they think it's doing?
I think there's a misconception that you can't be commercially progressive and deliver the outcomes if you're empathetic.
Ooh. Okay. No, I love that. I think that's a great statement.
Because I think there's the balance that I think sometimes there is a perception that empathy means soft.
Yep.
And then you can't balance that with the need to be commercial.
When in fact it's the opposite. Empathy often requires a much stronger backbone than, taking.
Yeah, and I think that's a fallacy as far as I'm concerned, because ultimately, so in the industry I work in, like, it is a people-centric kind of business, and or kind of it's people form the service, right? And if you're not empathetic to their needs, their requirements, you're not going to deliver the commercial outcomes. And there's that balance. So I think empathy is often thought of as quite a female trait, and I think sometimes the view is that could potentially be a weakness, or if you are a female in leadership, you actually have to be slightly more cutthroat and hard-nosed I just don't believe that's true.
Yeah. Do you think that that's diffusing though as of late? In
recent
years?
I definitely do. I think though,
we've got work to do.
It is definitely diffusing. I think though that it's diffusing, but I think we still need to understand what the right balance is. Like, there's almost like the education that's needed in how do you strike the right balance, because you can't be, and especially in the climate that we are operating in at the moment, which is a tough climate, right? Consumer sentiment finished the year last year second lowest on record. You only have to look at their predictions around interest rates, and it doesn't fill up people. It's a really highly...
The world's looking a little scarier.
It's an ambiguous time for a lot of people, and I think you can misplace the word empathy with kind of not doing the right thing, and like I think empathy and sympathy are two different things, and I think people get confused in trying to do the right thing, but actually really, I said, Brene Brown, she has a great video, and we did some great work with one of the TMA leaders, Kamal Sharma. Incredible guy. Have you? Yeah, I'm a big fan of his. He showed this video by Brene Brown, and it's all about this: don't offer, if you're offering someone a sandwich in a hole, that's just sympathy.
Yeah, ruinous empathy.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, where we did this whole program with him last year, we were lucky enough to work with him for a year, and I think that was helping to unpack, like, what is the right time for empathy, what's the right time for sympathy, and how do you balance that, and then also drive the commercial outcome. Because I think it is a misconception that you can't be empathetic in leadership, and it's a sign of weakness. But I also would say that it's hard because it's trying to find the right balance.
Yeah, I'm hopeful because I think we are on an upward trend in terms of the rise of the empathetic leader. So, but I think that there's still work to be done. If we shift towards, I would say, a look through the crystal ball, what do you think are going to be the foundational skills that are essential for leaders? To your point, as we get this whole new generation of employees, that we have a whole new ecology of digital and intangible workers, right? With the advent of AI and where that goes. How do you think the skill set for exceptional leaders is going to change, or is it going to change?
It would have to. We always have to be evolving, because I think the way that we work is fundamentally changed. We all became experts of, digital meetings, digital interactions during COVID, and that does still continue. But I think with that shift, we stripped away people's ability to read a room or read somebody's, emotions, thoughts and feelings, but just by looking at them. And actually, I think leadership as a result has really kind of, it's become harder, but it also means that we need to be arming people with different skill sets. And I think if my crystal ball was like, do things need to change? 100%, because the way that we work will keep evolving. And I think then if you're wanting to be, fundamentally, you're leading humans, leading people. Yeah. And as I already said, I think the need states of people kind of coming into the workforce now are fundamentally different. They want to be rewarded and recognised in different ways. They want to, they want to be seen in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that requires new skill sets. I think when I kind of was growing into my role, like a digital skill set was a great skill set to have, and I still think it's a really valuable asset to have, especially in marketing.
Yep.
I reckon that you'd probably see more people coming through with upskilling from having kind of psychology backgrounds or kind of behavioral understanding, because humans are complex. And I think the journey that we've been on in the last kind of 5 years or so has only made it that it's almost like put lit a torch under that and need states. And I think then if you're not evolving the way that you lead and the skill sets that you need to be a great leader, then it's going to be a really tough road ahead.
Last one from me, and I mean that we've covered so much ground. I mean, in terms of understanding yourself before understanding others, and what it takes to be an empathetic leader. Knowing what you know now, if you went back 10 years ago, I'm presuming you're speaking to first half Sian, and you could sit down and give her some advice that would set you up for even more success than the success that you've already earned. What would you tell her? Don't
be a dickhead.
Okay. It's the opening statement. Okay, and then beyond her sitting up straight and going, okay.
I think, as I said, my journey has always been quite linear because I was so task orientated and task focused. And I think if I was speaking to myself kind of at the start of my career, I'd be like, it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to say you're learning, and what do you not know? Like, I think it was interesting when the co-CEO model was developed with my co-CEO Laura Neese. We sat down and we were able to look at our skill sets and what was complementary. And I'd never run a P&L before, but then she had never kind of worked in a product specialism as deeply as I had. And you're kind of looking at this mishmash of human together to be able to build for what's next. I think what I'd say to myself is, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay not to be the finished article. You can slow down, and that's okay. But also, you can't overlook the fact that you need to have some life experience, and you should be looking at the experience beyond your role. I think there are things in everyone's lives that will make them a richer, deeper human, and bringing in some of the outside of work person into your day-to-day lives is only going to set you up for more success. You can't compartmentalize, as you can't children. We already discussed that.
Sian, thank you so much for your generosity of story, of wisdom. I have taken a huge amount from this conversation, and I'm sure that those that are tuning in will as well. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.